I'm Kevin Davis. This is the Catholic Family Podcast, and I'm very happy and honored today to be joined by Mario Derksen of Novus Ordo Watch. You guys all know him by now. He's a name that, of course, I don't really need to introduce, and so I won't. But we're going to talk a bit today about a video that came from Twitter, X, and from a guy named Anthony Abate. Now, some of you might know him. He is part of a YouTube channel and promoting, different opinions about culture, Catholicism, etc. And he recently posted a short video about Sedevacantism. And well, Mario would like to comment on that and maybe a little bit of my own commentary as well. I also watched the video a few times now and found it interesting. And I'm glad that Mario approached me and wanted to discuss it, because it was something that, that we, of course, disagree with opinions. But he did it charitably, he did it calmly, he wasn't throwing out, names and slurs and whatnot. And so we're going to attempt to do the same thing and try to answer some of his objections as we go. So without further ado, Mario, I don't know if you want to just kind of give us an introduction to the video, where it came about.
All right. So Anthony Abate sent this tweet on August 8th, which I think he was responding to one of his friends or associates. Scholastic Zoomer, I think, is the profile name on Twitter, and he had just become a Sedevacantist, he announced. And so Anthony shared a few thoughts of his own about Sedevacantism and why he doesn't think it's the right position and why he doesn't find it helpful. And so, like I said, he did so very charitably, and I thought it would be important to respond. Also, we're not going to be polemical about this. We're just going to stick to the facts and, see if we can help, bring some light into this whole situation we're all in. And, I like to remember that, or I like to think that if this were 1957 now, instead of 2025, look, we would all be sitting, so to speak, in the same pew at the same mass, using the same catechisms, believing the exact same thing, and there really wouldn't be any sort of theological differences between us, right? This situation and all these divisions as far as, recognize and resist, Sedevacantism, Novus Ordo, conservative Novus Ordo, that is, none of this will be an issue if it were 1957 now and Pius XII were still Pope. All of this was occasioned by the work of John the 23rd and Paul VI, with the Second Vatican Council and everything that happened after. And so I like to remember that, because we can talk about these things charitably and insightfully, and always just remember that, ultimately we're all trying to be Catholic, and we're all trying to figure out what the right position is in our times. And no matter how you look at it, nobody can dispute that this is a very difficult and unprecedented situation, I think. So with that, I think we can start. And Anthony, I hope you don't mind. What we'd like to do is play your entire 12-minute clip, and we'll just jump in on occasion and answer some things or comment on some of the things you said. We're not trying to steal your content or anything. We really just want to make sure we give the audience exactly what you said in full length and in context. So that's why we'd like to play the whole thing.
Some quick thoughts on Sedevacantism. Rob and I did a show last night where we had two Zoomers on debating whether the church is on the rise or decline. So I didn't get a chance to discuss any of the things that I actually wanted to talk about on the show last night, but one of them was Sedevacantism a bit. Now, I've never done a deep dive into Sedevacantism. I don't know every single argument that they have for their position, but it's a little bit on my mind because one of my mutuals, Scholastic Zoomer, who is a good dude, and I really do like him, he announced this week that he has come to the conclusion that Sedevacantism, that's his position now. And there's something I've noticed about people who do come to that conclusion. And it's that after they reach it, their entire modus operandi becomes proving that the post-conciliar church is no longer the Catholic Church. So it's not like they come to this conclusion and they come to some deep mystical sense of holiness, and they start practicing traditions that have been long lost since the council, and then that then leads them to holiness. Instead, it seems like they embark on this almost negative evangelization, like an anti-evangelization type of thing, where they then need to prove that the conclusion they came to is true, and every interaction they have with Catholics becomes this argument about how the Novus Ordo sect is no longer the Catholic Church.
Stop there. Thank you very much. So let me say a few things. And I'm not trying to, reject any like every possible criticism or anything. Sure, it may very well be that some people are maybe, I don't know. It's not like I'm constantly reviewing all Sedevacantist tweets on Twitter or anything. But I think the big picture is quite simply that any convert will want to talk about what converted him, right? If he's going to talk about theology, of course, if he just found out why it is impossible that the Vatican II Church be the Catholic Church, if it's impossible that John the 23rd or at least Paul VI and his successors, impossible for them to have been popes, sure, he'll want to tell others about that and share that and try to get them to see the light, because that's a huge realization that solves a lot of problems. And yes, of course, also then it creates, so to speak, other problems. But the point being, it's not a side issue. Whether or not what we've seen roughly since Vatican II, whether or not that is Catholic and was approved and imposed by the Catholic hierarchy or not, that is a huge deal. And so even if you disagree with the Sedevacantist position, even if you don't hold that, still you would have to agree, I think, that whether or not a particular institution is the Roman Catholic Church, is operating with the authority of Christ, that is of great relevance. Okay, so that's all I'd like to say in response so far. You can go ahead and play the clip again, Kevin.
Difficulties. And sorry to the editors, by the way. You guys are going to have a good time. All right, here's Anthony again.
Scholastic Zoomer announced this was his position. I'm seeing him posting pictures of Pope Francis, praising Martin Luther. And I'm not disagreeing that all those things are problematic. And I don't even think the Sedevacantist position is crazy. I think that there's definitely enough there for there to be a plausible case for it. I think Sedevacantists are Catholic. They hold the Catholic faith. They just think that what is being presented to us now is not the same Catholic faith that was presented to generations before that. So I don't ever engage in the discourse where I say they're Protestant, things like that. No, there's a lot of Sedevacantists who I admire, who I like, who I think are really smart, who are unafraid to point things out that should be pointed out. So this is not me. I am generalizing when I say this is something I've noticed, but there are exceptions to the rule. I've had real positive interactions with the guy who runs Novus Ordo Watch, and a bunch of others. I have a bunch of friends who came to the same conclusion. So Scholastic Zoomer tweeted out the other day, if Novus Ordoism is true, then the gates of hell have prevailed and tons of errors and heresies have entered the authentic magisterium. If Sedevacantism is true, then we live in evil times, but Christ's promise is true. So I responded that if Sedevacantism is true, then the gates of hell have prevailed. There is no magisterium, and the prophecy in Daniel that the kingdom's sovereignty will never pass to another is proven false. So in Daniel 2:44, it says, and in those days, and in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, nor shall its sovereignty be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end. It shall stand forever. So he responded, and so did Novus Ordo Watch. So he said the magisterium still exists, but no one is exercising it. You essentially believe the same thing because whatever the diabolical men who we call popes promulgate, you refuse to submit to. Fiducia supplicans, Amoris, Laetitia, etc. All part of your so-called magisterium. Do you submit? Yes or no? What's interesting about those documents is there's like actually nothing to submit to. I can recognize they're very problematic, but it's not like I need a gay blessing. It's it's not like I'm going and receiving communion in a state of mortal sin. I don't think anything in those documents is binding on the faithful. I think they're horrific. They're horrific guidelines that were put out to priests and how to be in pastoral needs. I think they're horrible. But there's nothing to submit to in them. I don't think there's been anything that the Vatican, since the council, has promulgated that requires us to submit to that would meet the guidelines of the gates of hell prevailing. So,
all right, thanks. So, okay, let's look at that a little bit. First, I would say to Anthony that, okay, it may be your opinion that there's nothing to submit to, but my advice then would be, if your position is correct and the Vatican II Church is the true church, you should check with your local bishop and ask him if there's anything in those documents you need to submit to, you need to assent to, because I'm pretty sure that when we say that a document or a teaching or something is binding, that means that you must assent. Okay, you cannot dissent from it. It does not mean that you must do what is merely being permitted, right? So obviously, when the church says, unmarried men of a certain age can be ordained priests, that doesn't mean you have to become a priest. It just means you have to assent that it is that is the law of the church, and that is permitted and possible, and that's not wrong or evil or anything. So Anthony's point that there's nothing really mandated in those documents, well, we got to remember that the church cannot permit evil as an option either. Okay, it's not that the church just can't mandate evil; she also can't permit it. Even nobody would say that a parent is being a good parent if mommy or daddy decide that the child is allowed to eat dish soap. It just doesn't have to. Okay, I mean, that'd be silly. So I don't think we can get around these issues and these problematic documents by saying, well, there's nothing actually mandated. No, there may not be mandated, but if adulterers, unrepentant public adulterers, can receive Holy Communion, obviously it doesn't say that they have to, but the church cannot permit it either. And I think it should be fairly easy to see why.
Isn't that something, though, doesn't that mean that they're teaching error to the universal church, isn't that impossible? I mean, it's something that I've been doing this series with Louis Verrecchio covering Vatican II and the actual documents of Vatican II. And it's just interesting when you actually compare what is said in those documents compared to what the church said before. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like, okay, well, how can the church possibly teach in Amoris Laetitia, or the Pope supposedly teach that now, sin's pretty much subjective. It doesn't, it kind of depends on the situation. I mean, it just seems like that's something you can't to me, again, I'm no expert, but can you just shrug that off and just be kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really affect me? Well, isn't it the church? I mean, isn't the church the bride of Christ?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be spotless? Not just like it's bad, but it doesn't affect
right.
me.
Just like we couldn't say that, Christ permitted the pagans to remain pagan. He just didn't mandate it. That's silly, right? That wouldn't, we would obviously recognize right away, well, no, that's incompatible with Christ being the Savior, the Messiah, God incarnate. He couldn't possibly permit pagans to continue in their paganism as long as he doesn't mandate that we all become pagans. Now, there's 3 magisterial sources I'd like to quote. It's encyclicals from Popes Pius the 12th and Gregory the 16th, and also an apostolic constitution from Pope Pius the 6th. And they mention the infallibility of the church in her universal discipline. And this is something that very often gets misunderstood or isn't even known about, because usually when infallibility comes up, the only thing usually that is mentioned is dogmatic definitions and ex cathedra statements. And of course, those are infallible, but that's infallible teaching. The church is also infallible in her universal disciplinary laws, and that only makes sense. Now, the infallibility of the church's laws, universal laws, does not mean that these laws can never change. What it means is that they are always guaranteed to be safe to embrace, and they're always going to be in harmony with the faith. And this only makes sense because it would be no use having a church that is infallible in her teaching if at the same time she can mislead her flock in terms of governing. Right? Because the church doesn't only teach, she also governs. And so the faithful must also have the assurance that they cannot be misled by the church when she governs them through her laws. And so, Kevin, if you could put up the screenshot I sent you, and we can also put this, we can actually put the source documents for these things in the show notes. What we see here is first Pope Pius XII from the encyclical Mystici Corporis, number 66. Let me quote it. Certainly the loving mother, meaning the church, is spotless in the sacraments, by which she gives birth to and nourishes her children, in the faith, which she has always preserved inviolate, in her sacred laws imposed on all, in the evangelical counsels which she recommends, in those heavenly gifts and extraordinary graces through which, with inexhaustible fecundity, she generates hosts of martyrs, virgins, and confessors. The big takeaway here is that Pius XII teaches the church is spotless in her sacred laws that are imposed on all. And what this means is universal law pertains either to the Latin Church or the Eastern churches, or both of them together. That doesn't matter. But it is not like a local law only for a particular diocese, or something that only pertains to a particular order, right? Like the Franciscans or the Dominicans or something. But it's laws imposed on everyone. So that's the teaching of Pope Pius XII. And you can find that also in the pre-Vatican II dogmatic theology books. Look for infallibility, the church's infallibility, and then specifically look for the secondary objects of infallibility, or it may be called the indirect objects of infallibility. And you'll find that it's the church's universal disciplinary law and other things as well, like canonization of saints, dogmatic facts, and so on. Then Pope Pius VI, Apostolic Constitution Auctorum Fidei, I believe that was 1786, or thereabouts. And he says this, quote, this is at the end of condemnation of an error. As if the church, which is ruled by the Spirit of God, could have established discipline, which is not only useless and burdensome for Christian liberty to endure, but which is even dangerous and harmful and leading to superstition and materialism. So he's teaching clearly that the church cannot, in her discipline, she cannot legislate some things that are useless and burdensome, and she cannot legislate anything that is dangerous or harmful. And
can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious. So when you say this, do they have an argument when they're saying, is Amoris Laetitia, for example, is it not legislation? Is it not something that is infallible teaching? I mean, because I think this is, I hear this often, or I see it often, that that's kind of the argument. Like, yeah, no, it was just Francis just kind of writing something, just now, don't worry about it. I mean, is there an argument there, or is this something that's like, I mean, this is a clearly coming from Rome, from the hierarchy of the church, from the Pope? Do they have any legs to stand on with that argument?
I'm not sure I understand. Amoris Laetitia came from Rome.
Right. No, that's what I mean, though. So often, though, their argument is still like, I mean, is this enough? And they just kind of shrug their shoulders. They're kind of like, well, it's not official teaching because it's not ex cathedra, or it's, it's just kind of, it's just Francis.
Well,
they always just kind of make less of it than it actually.
Well,
is.
He is certainly establishing law, or giving the doctrinal underpinnings of law. And it's part of his magisterium. It's been entered into the official acts of the Apostolic See. It can't. If it had come from a true pope, it could not possibly be evil. So, and whereas Amoris Laetitia clearly is evil. And so, no, that's not an argument. I mean, you really can't get out of that. Sure, people like Dr. Robert Fastigi have bent over backwards trying to reconcile, trying to spin this into something resembling orthodoxy, but ultimately it doesn't work. But you can see the very fact that he's trying so hard actually shows that he knows it is impossible for that to be wrong, for that to be either, heretical or dangerously erroneous in some other fashion, or blasphemous or sacrilegious, right? These things are impossible. And that's why someone like Robert Fastigi is trying so hard to make it, to square it with orthodoxy. But so Amoris Laetitia is actually one of the proofs that show that Francis cannot have been the Pope. Does that answer your question, or did I miss?
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's not something that I certainly not my argument, but I just feel like when you're talking about this being a discipline of the church, I just feel like they'll just be like, yeah, but is it really? It's just, I just think maybe there's a misunderstanding of what is the discipline of the church. What is it that is infallible? And that's kind of the point you're making here, right? That it is promulgating it, then they can't be error. But I just know for sure you're going to see this like, yeah, but the Pope didn't say it ex cathedra, and that's kind of my argument. But I'm totally with you. I mean, I think your explanation is certainly
it doesn't have. Okay, considering that this pertains to the church's universal discipline, it cannot be harmful. It cannot be heterodox. It cannot be sacrilegious. It cannot be dangerous. So there's only two options, logically speaking. Either what he legislates in or teaches in Amoris Laetitia isn't harmful, evil, or sacrilegious, or blasphemous, or he wasn't the Pope. And so, I know you were basically raised Sedevacantist, but for somebody like me who was raised Novus Ordo, at first, of course, you try to make it work, right? At first, you try to find arguments for why this doesn't prove Sedevacantism. And in my case, it had to do, it's going back to the days of John Paul II, right? That's when I was Novus Ordo. And I never immediately jumped onto the Sedevacantist bandwagon. Of course, I first tried to dismiss those ideas, right? I first tried to defend John Paul II's claim to the papacy until at some point I just couldn't do it. Couldn't do it anymore. And it was just, the truth was just staring me in the face. So I didn't want Sedevacantism to be true at that point because I knew it would, it was just inconvenient. But I don't want to go off on a tangent. Let me see. Let me read the third quote that we had there from, this one is from Pope Gregory XVI, the encyclical Mirari Vos, which was a big encyclical against liberalism. The discipline this is Pope Gregory speaking, the discipline sanctioned by the Church must never be rejected or be branded as contrary to certain principles of natural law. It must never be called crippled or imperfect or subject to civil authority. In this discipline, the administration of sacred rites, standards of morality, and the reckoning of the rights of the Church and her ministers are embraced. Okay, so there we have it once again. So it's not enough to say, well, this law doesn't oblige me to do anything. Like Anthony was saying that, well, he's not looking for, to have a gay union blessed. He's not looking for receiving Holy Communion while practicing adultery. So it doesn't really, there's nothing for him to submit to. But that's not the case. Like the Church can't permit these things either. Her law cannot be, as Pope Gregory said, it cannot be imperfect. It cannot be crippled. It cannot be, dangerous and so forth. So, okay. So Anthony also said in the point that we last looked at, that we last played in his video, he said, I don't think there's been anything that the Vatican, since the Council has promulgated, that requires us to submit to that would meet the guidelines of the gates of hell prevailing. Well, I picked out 10 examples, or I should say counterexamples, showing that the Vatican very much has promulgated things that would indicate the gates of hell have prevailed if these things came from valid popes. Okay, and obviously we can't go into a lot of detail for all of these, but we can, at some point, if desired, we can look at any of these more closely. The first thing that always comes to my mind is the 1983 Code of Canon Law. And the first thing you want to know, okay, so the Code of Canon Law, that is like the ultimate in universal disciplinary law, right? That's the book of all the Church's laws for the Latin Rite. Okay, the Eastern churches have their own canon law, but same idea. And in the 1983 Code of Canon Law, which I might add, John Paul II promulgated with the full force of his authority. And you can find it. So there is a decree in which he promulgates that code, and he invokes the apostolic authority of Saints Peter and Paul, like the whole 9 yards, right? So he promulgates it solemnly. And if he had been the Pope, then it would be, the entire Code of Canon Law would be protected by infallibility. Again, not in the sense of saying that these laws could never be changed, but in the sense of saying that these laws cannot be in themselves harmful, dangerous, sacrilegious, heretical, etc. So Canon 844, Section 3 of the Novus Ordo Code of Canon Law of 1983 says the following. And maybe you can even put that up on the screen. Certainly, we can provide the sources for that in the show notes. Section 3 here, or Article 3, whatever it is the most egregious here, the most shocking example. Okay, it says, quote, Catholic ministers administer the sacraments of penance, Eucharist, and anointing of the sick licitly to members of the Eastern churches which do not have full communion with the Catholic Church, if they seek such on their own accord and are properly disposed. This is also valid for members of other churches, which in the judgment of the Apostolic See are in the same condition in regard to the sacraments as these Eastern churches, unquote. That right there is another example, or is one example of an impossible canon. Okay, that right there is sacrilegious and inherently evil. This was a bit legalese in there. Basically, what it's saying is that the Eastern Orthodox and similar non-Catholics can sometimes, under certain conditions, receive the sacraments of Holy Communion, extreme unction, and penance without renouncing their adherence to Eastern Orthodoxy or whatever schismatic or heretical sect they may belong to. That's the long and the short of it. And of course, some have tried to argue that, oh, well, no, but it says there only if they're properly disposed. And so that would mean conversion to Catholicism. No, it doesn't, and it cannot possibly mean that. I can't go into all of that in detail now. I just want to mention it as one of the examples that that answer Anthony's request for, or, where he said that he can't think of anything that the Vatican II Church has done that would mean the gates of hell have prevailed. If you look at the commentaries on canon law, they will very much admit that this is a change from the prior law where such things were strictly forbidden. And I want to also emphasize that we're not talking, as regards Canon 844, Section 3, we're not talking about danger of death. Some people say, well, but in danger of death, there can be some, like absolution can maybe be given conditionally. Yeah, but danger of death is not legislated in that particular part of the law. That's Section 4 right underneath it. This one here, we're talking about Section 3. And if for anyone who suspects that this is not the correct interpretation, that there is some orthodox interpretation to it, no, you can actually verify that what I just said is exactly what they mean. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. You can look that up. Also, for example, in some Novus Ordo magisterial documents, for example, in John Paul II's encyclical Ecclesia de Eucharistia, paragraph number 45. And I believe that was from 2003. Okay. The whole point of this particular canon 844 section 3 is to allow certain Protestants, certain non-Catholics, certain Orthodox to receive some of the sacraments without having to convert to Catholicism first. That is what that's about, and that is intrinsically evil. Then another example, since Anthony said he can't think of any examples of anything that the Vatican II Church has done that would show that the gates of hell have prevailed against it. Another thing would be the 1993 Directory for the Application of Principles and Norms on Ecumenism. Okay, that thing is essentially a very long handbook, if you will, on how to practice ecumenism. And so it's based, of course, on Vatican II. And, Vatican II remained more like theoretical and just touched on some things and got the ball rolling. But this directory is what's really implementing the council. It says, okay, here is what is and isn't permitted. And one of the things, and I'm afraid I don't think I have the exact reference handy right now, in that document, one of the things is that Catholics are permitted to share sanctuaries with non-Catholics, with Protestants and or Eastern Orthodox, okay? Meaning, that's not to say that they can just have joint masses or anything. I'm not saying that, but rather the what's permitted there is that a Protestant could be allowed to use a Catholic church, a Novus Ordo church, for Protestant worship. And not only that, but that even under certain conditions, the Catholics are even allowed to share their, essentially all the paraphernalia that the Protestants might need to worthily celebrate their service, okay? So a quick example would be to say, okay, well, the Lutherans, they want to have a communion service. They don't have a chalice available. Let's just give them the Catholic chalice, okay? Or we'll give them a ciborium here so they can have their invalid Eucharist in the Catholic ciborium. Worthily celebrate their heretical invalid Eucharistic service, or even if it's valid, like with the Orthodox, for example, using a Catholic chalice or a Catholic ciborium, okay? That is evil, okay? To use Catholic sacred vessels for a heretical or schismatic service. And here I actually just found the exact reference, and I'm going to quote it. So Nobody can say I'm making this up. This is, again, the 1993 directory for the application of principles and norms on ecumenism. And here's what it says in number 137, quote, Catholic churches are consecrated or blessed buildings which have an important theological and liturgical significance for the Catholic community. They are therefore generally reserved for Catholic worship. However, if priests, ministers, or communities not in full communion with the Catholic Church do not have a place or the liturgical objects necessary for celebrating worthily their religious ceremonies, the diocesan bishop may allow them the use of a church or a Catholic building and also lend them what may be necessary for their services. Under similar circumstances, permission may be given to them for interment or for the celebration of services at Catholic cemeteries. Okay, this is nuts. It's disgusting. It's harmful. It's dangerous. It's sacrilegious. It's heretical. And for those who will say, well, it's just some directory on ecumenism, this was promulgated with the full apostolic authority of John Paul II in 1993. Let me see if I can. Okay, here, let's see. On March 25th, 1993, His Holiness Pope John Paul II approved this directory, confirmed it by his authority, and ordered that it be published, anything to the contrary notwithstanding. Okay, that is at the very end of that document. And I'm sure John Paul II also mentioned it a few times in other speeches or documents or whatever. And this has been like the guiding tool or the blueprint for Novus Ordo ecumenism since 1993. Okay, so that is what we mean about, this is what we mean by examples of the gates of hell prevailing against the false Vatican II church. And this is why we have to say it cannot be. It cannot possibly be the Catholic Church. There is an interesting video out there which is a debate between two Sedevacantist priests of the Society of St. Pius V, not the 10th, but the 5th, Father Clarence Kelly and Father William Jenkins. I believe Bishop Kelly was not a bishop yet. And then they debated against Count Neri Caponi and Father Brian Harrison, representing the Novus Ordo side, or, the traditionalist Novus Ordo side. And we can make that available in the show notes. It's very interesting because it's a very insightful and highly recommended. I think it's over 2 hours long. So a lot gets, a lot of light is shed on these issues with both sides responding to each other. I really liked it. I can't remember exactly what year. It was sometime, I believe, in the 1990s. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell on the other points that I have here. I said I would give 10 examples. I've given 2 so far. Let me just kind of quickly go over the other ones. These are examples, again, of how we know that the Novus Ordo Church cannot be the Catholic Church, because these are instances where if it were the Catholic Church, you would have to say the gates of hell have prevailed. There is, of course, obviously, Francis' apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, chapter 8, especially footnote number 303, in which Francis says that God may actually desire, may actually will that certain people continue in adultery. So that's a blasphemy. Then there is the document on human fraternity signed at Abu Dhabi between Francis and some Muslim prelate of sorts. And that was in 2019. And that has also been included in the Acts of the Apostolic See. And that document teaches that God wills a diversity of religions. The pluralism and, I forget the exact quote, the pluralism and diversity of religions are willed by God. And it mentions that in the same breath with things like the diversity of sexes, of languages, and so forth. So there is no way to spin that into something orthodox. Then, of course, you have the Novus Ordo Mass, okay, which is essentially a Protestant meal service. Even if we suppose that it is valid, even then, it would still be a Protestant service, okay? The Novus Ordo Mass is a disaster and certainly not an expression of the Catholic faith. Even then, it is still a non-Catholic rite, okay? It certainly does not express the Catholic faith. Then, example number 6, the canonizations of Paul VI and John Paul II. Francis canonized both of them, meaning he declared them to be saints and he enrolled them among the saints and declared that they are to be venerated, or that they are worthy of veneration. And all you need to know is, I know there's a big debate about this in the Vatican II Church. Are canonizations infallible or not? Well, at the end of the day, the Catholic who accepts, or people who accept Francis as a valid pope, they have to assent to what he said in the decree of canonization. And that is very solemn, seemingly infallible language. And I wish I had the quote here right now, but we can you can easily find that out if you look online for the canonization of Paul VI in 2018, or John Paul II. I think that was in 2014. If these two people are saints, what do we need saints for? I mean, that is just it's insane. Okay, especially Paul VI, who essentially, if I may speak in informal terms, so to speak, abolished Catholicism. Okay, that's kind of how you can put it. There's no way that man, could be a saint in the Roman Catholic Church, right? It was like the church's undertaker, if the church could die. Then example number 7, the partial communion ecclesiology of Vatican II. Okay, this idea that there's a little bit of the Catholic Church in every religion. I'm putting it a little polemically right now. This idea that other baptized, quote unquote, Christians are in communion with the, I'm not even sure exactly how they would put it now in the Vatican II Church. Are they in communion with the Catholic Church or with the mystical body? It's a gigantic mess, this ecclesiology. And so that's another example of an impossibility for the Catholic Church. Then the Vatican II document Nostra Aetate, okay, on non-Christian religions. It was promulgated in 1965. That whole thing is a disaster. Then example number 9, the invalidity of the 1968 rite of episcopal consecration solemnly promulgated by Paul VI. Even if we say that the phrase spiritus principalis, which occurs in the form of the new rite of episcopal consecration, even if we concede that the spiritus principalis, the governing spirit as it is translated, even if we agree that that is the Holy Ghost, we would still run into the problem of the problem of invalidity arises because it does not, the form for consecrating the bishop in this 1968 rite does not specify what the Holy Ghost is supposed to do, okay? And therefore rendering it invalid, okay? We can do a whole show on that if you'd like, Kevin. Or we can put something.
It's a big topic.
In the show notes, yes. And lastly, example number 10, John Paul II's apostolic letter Fidei Depositum, I believe it was 1992, in which he declared, using his supposed apostolic authority, he declared that the new catechism, the so-called Catechism of the Catholic Church, is a sure norm or a safe norm for teaching the Catholic faith. So there we have 10 concrete examples. Again, each of these can be, we can do a deep dive on, but that's all I want to mention right now. The question now is, if all of these things that I just mentioned can come from the true Roman Catholic Church, what good would it be? Okay, on what grounds, in fact, could the Catholic Church then turn around and condemn heretics and heretical sects, right? If she herself teaches heresy, allows heresy, rewards heretics, and so forth, right? It gives the sacraments to heretics. How would such a scenario credibly fulfill Christ's promise that the gates of hell won't prevail? It just doesn't make any sense. And so Sedevacantism is simply the realization that since these things cannot have come from the Catholic Church, they did not come from the Catholic Church and must have therefore come from some other entity. Okay, certainly not from the lawful shepherds, the lawful vicars of Christ. Okay, we can go back to Anthony now, and I apologize that this has gotten so long. Let's go to back to Anthony's video and listen some more.
Novus Ordo Watch said, but we should also remember that the prophecy of the scepter not departing from Judah in Genesis was not made void during the period of the Second Temple before the arrival of the Messiah, simply because there was no Davidic king during that long time. There is also a prophecy found in Isaiah which foreshadows the papacy and which says that the peg will be removed, and this dovetails quite well with St. Paul's teaching in 2 Thessalonians about the restraining force, catacomb, being taken away to allow the mystery of iniquity with its operation of error to unfold. I would say that Sedevacantist position fits these prophecies quite well. By contrast, I don't see how a defected church with heretical and blasphemous magisterium would salvage anything. That's certainly not the kingdom of Christ. So, my issue with that is, if the Novus Ordo religion, that they call it, and if the post-conciliar church is no longer the Catholic Church, then the church's sovereignty has passed to another people. My position on this is basically that there's nothing that can be accomplished by becoming a Sedevacantist, except there could be spiritual harm involved. I think it's very important that we all remain in communion with the church, even though the church seems kind of hectic right now.
Thank you. I'll just make some quick observations here. First, I would say that what Anthony just said there confirms the importance of knowing whether the Vatican II Church is the Catholic Church or not, right? Because he says it's very important that we all remain in communion with the church. Well, precisely, but what church, right? And so regarding his argument about sovereignty, let me just punt on that and say, well, if his argument about sovereignty proves the Vatican II Church to be the true Catholic Church, well, then there can be no problem with the conciliar and post-conciliar magisterium. So either way, his position is not really tenable, because either his argument proves that that is like that the Sedevacantism is false, but then he'd have to accept Amoris Laetitia and all the rest. Like, you can't have that sort of middle position where you're saying, no, the sovereignty, can't be passed on to another people. And by the way, I'm not conceding that argument. Of course, I'm just bypassing it for the sake of argument. Then there cannot be this problem that we're evidently having, right, with the clear defection of the Vatican II or the Novus Ordo magisterium. So that would be my comments on that. You can go ahead and play the video again, please.
We're at a place right now where things are so bad, and I do think Sedevacantists diagnose the problem correctly. I think they just have the wrong antidote to fix it. I don't think anything gets accomplished by going, okay, this is a false religion and this is a fake sect and let's just go off and do our own thing. I think the only way to accomplish anything is if we are all in communion together. And I'm not even a recognize and resist guy. I'm not saying recognize Leo and resist him. I'm at a point where I just say things are so bad. will take divine intervention to fix. There's nothing any of us are going to do. The hierarchy is so corrupt at this point that there's nothing leaving that hierarchy is going to do for my soul, and there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I'll accomplish by becoming a Sedevacantist.
Thanks. So a couple of, or rather a few things on that. First of all, I would say Anthony's comments here are confusing. I mean, he just said that Sedevacantism is the wrong antidote, and then he says that he has no antidote and can't fix it. Okay, so I'm not sure, how that is, how he can reject Sedevacantism on the grounds that it's not an antidote if he doesn't have one either. I think it's important to remember that Sedevacantism is not so much an antidote as it is a diagnosis. Staying in a religion that we know to be false is not an option. Okay, and I think that should be obvious, right? So the Novus Ordo religion, and yes, it is its own religion. You can't be Catholic and adhere to that objectively, right? And the way Anthony speaks, I guess he can only talk like that because he doesn't submit to his own hierarchy anyway, right? Because he's essentially saying he's tuning it all out and doing his own thing, ironically, right? But he's saying we shouldn't do our own thing, and then he in the same breath essentially makes clear that, well, it's all so corrupt, it's all so bad, I'm just gonna do my own thing. He didn't use those exact words, but that's what he's communicating, right? And regarding his comment that there's nothing to be accomplished by becoming a Sedevacantist except people will no longer take you seriously, I would be very careful with not embracing a position because of being afraid of not being taken seriously, because in a way that's why a lot of people abandon our Lord when he taught them about the real presence and the Holy Eucharist, right? After the multiplication of the loaves, when our Lord said, my body is food indeed, or my flesh is food indeed, and my blood is drink indeed, right? And unless you eat me, you will not have life, and so forth in John chapter 6. A lot of people abandoned him, it says. And I guess you could say because they were afraid that this cannot be, they said this cannot be taken seriously, and perhaps they themselves were thinking, well, if I start, adhering to that, who's going to take me seriously? So I would just be, this is not a good argument. You're afraid of not being taken seriously. And my final comment on that point is it's all or nothing, right? You're going to have to be either full-blown Novus Ordo with Amoris Laetitia and Fiducia Supplicans and the whole 9 yards, or a Sedevacantist. Okay, let's go ahead and play some more of the clip.
It's not absurd, but you're leaving the fight, in my opinion. You're basically saying with your mouth that, oh, you think this is a false religion. But if you really did think that, you wouldn't be so caught up in every little thing that's happening in Rome. That's why during the Francis papacy, you guys reported on every little thing, because you still do know deep in your heart that the Bishop of Rome is the most important person in the world. So I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going to end this video other than, I'm open to having conversations with Sedevacantists. I don't say they're not Catholic. I do think they're Catholic. I think that their position is something they came to through, vigorous study or however they came to it.
All right. Thank you. So first I'd say, Anthony, invitation accepted. We can talk anytime. But let me just say, no, why did we report? I mean, Novus Ordo Watch did report on every little thing that was happening in Rome. It's not because we're somehow saying, oh, wow, maybe deep down in our hearts we know that, there is a pope there or something. No, it's simply because the mission of Novus Ordo Watch is precisely to watch the Novus Ordo religion and to document and demonstrate and prove that the religion that is being promulgated there in the Vatican these days is essentially substantially different from the Roman Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic faith of Pope Pius XII and his predecessors. That's why it has nothing to do with some subconscious acknowledgement of the false popes or anything like that. Okay, please go ahead.
My biggest issue with it is this negative evangelization that comes along with it. It's the trying to convince every other Catholic that they're in a false religion at that point. I don't understand how, as a Sedevacantist, you evangelize and bring people to the light of truth, where I still see that despite all the issues that we take with the hierarchy, the only place to bring people to Jesus Christ and his church is through that church. Like, I don't know, like the Sedevacantists aren't out preaching the gospel. They're preaching the Novus Ordo church is a false church. That's not evangelizing.
Commenting purely,
okay,
at least it seems like purely on. Good, yeah, I think he's commenting on Twitter Catholics, right? I mean, he's commenting on what he sees on X. He's commenting perhaps on your Twitter account, which is, as you said, pointing out the Novus Ordo, absurdities. And I think this is obviously a guy who's never met a samurai priest or another priest of the the good Sedevacantist priests or clergy or the nuns, etc., who their entire vocation is spent on just the salvation of souls. And I'm sure many people, anyone who has met these clergy and these religious, they would know that that's simply not the case. And it's not, I'm not going to say it's a silly thing to say, because I think he is just, his experience with Sedevacantists is on the internet. And I think you and I talked a little bit before the show that I think there are things that Sedevacantists should probably fix on the internet, myself included, not being so combative, not being sometimes uncharitable, etc. And but I just want to say that, I mean, I think from my opinion, I have a brother who's a priest. I have two sisters who are nuns. What he's saying is simply not true. There is absolutely evangelization going on. Look at the schools that are spreading out across the U.S. especially. And I'd be happy also, as you say, I'd be happy to talk with him about that and share more information if he's willing to see it.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd like to point out here is that Anthony is again showing how important it is to know if the Vatican II Church is Catholic or not, right? So in a way, he's kind of answered that his own question. As far as evangelization goes, I think it is, of course, when you evangelize people, you're of course going to go to the lowest hanging fruit first, right, so to speak. And that is the Novus Ordos, simply because they already understand the importance of Catholicism. They already believe that Catholicism is the true religion. So maybe that explains why, I mean, you're going to first reach out to the people that are closest to you, right? Or that you share the most in common with. And okay, so as regards evangelizing Protestants, I used to spend a lot of time doing that when I was Novus Ordo, and later when I was kind of SSPX, sort of. And the problem is, first of all, what are you converting them to? Okay, why do you really want to? First of all, do you want to teach them about the true faith and the magisterium and the papacy and so forth, and then they find out you've brought them to a church which tells them that God may want them to commit adultery, that religious liberty is a wonderful thing, and so forth. How exactly does that facilitate their salvation, right? Bringing Protestants and Jews and Muslims and atheists, agnostics, pagans, bringing them into Catholicism is very difficult in our time, but not because of Sedevacantism. It's just the situation that we find ourselves in today. So that's not a Sedevacantist problem per se, or nor does it show in any way that Sedevacantism is false or misguided or anything. Inevitably, you're going to run, and any convert you make, he's going to run into the problem of the Vatican II Church. Okay, And it takes, yes, there are still Protestants who become Catholic, and yes, by that I mean Sedevacantist. It does happen, but of course, it's not so easy to help a Protestant understand that, because you're running the danger of scandalizing him when you have to explain to him what situation we're in today. So it was a lot easier to bring non-Catholics into the Catholic Church in 1957 than it is today. But no matter what you do, sure, maybe for a conservative Novus Ordo, or for a Novus Ordo believer who accepts everything that Francis has taught and that, the Vatican II Church is doing, for them it might not be that difficult to make a Protestant convert, but then usually those are also the people who don't believe. What's the alternative anyway, right? Are we going to convert people to the Vatican II Church and then tell them to ignore the last 60 years and, just have them focus on Stations of the Cross or something? I mean, you can't get around this problem. So no matter, evangelization is not as easy as it used to be. And I think that's why also you don't find as many Sedevacantists eagerly, trying to convert Protestants, because it's so difficult to do. And that'd be my thoughts on that. Then,
and sorry, just real quick. I mean, it is kind of a funny thing when you get into that and you talk to someone at work or whatever, and you're kind of like just telling them basically, yeah, I'm a Catholic, and yeah, I don't believe the Pope's the Pope, and no, actually not since 1958. I mean, it's true, and I really believe it, but it's hard. It's a hard sell, because it's kind of like, wait, you're a Catholic and you don't believe the Pope's the Pope? I mean,
right.
It's just, it makes it tough. It is a difficult time to try to convince anyone else the truth of Catholicism. Yeah.
Right. And also with, Anthony's own position, right? If a Protestant asks him about, religion, and he says, yeah, I'm Catholic, depending on how informed the Protestant is, he may just think, okay, in other words, you're against the death penalty, and you're for open borders, and you believe in, blessings for gay unions, for example.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden,
none of that, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very difficult. Please go ahead and play some more of Anthony.
That is my biggest contention with it, and I don't know. I'd rather be a trad who is still in communion with the bishops and in communion with the church, and just take that traditional faith and those traditional practices and implement them in my life, do my best to raise my family according to those traditions, and just await God's intervention, because that is what it will take to fix this. Sedevacantists on the internet are not going to fix this situation. So I would say all of us need to be on guard for publicly calling out what's wrong in the church, because
yeah, I mean, look, I totally understand, of course, this perspective, right? But you can basically not look at the problem, but it's not going to solve the problem, and it's not. I mean, you have to deal with the problem. You can't just tune it out. If Catholicism is true, and obviously it is, but if the Vatican II Church is the Catholic Church, then you can't just tune it out and just focus on traditional practices or whatever, because that is. I mean, Anthony's talking about being in communion with the bishops. Yeah, I'm not sure he is. I mean, he may be on paper, but I mean, does he go to the diocese for instruction in the faith? Would he comply with the bishop? Like, for example, does he use if the diocese has its own catechism, or does he use the catechism that is recommended by his local bishop? Probably not, right? And so it all goes back to the issue: is the Vatican II Church the Catholic Church? Can we find Catholicism in that church? Is that the same religion as the religion of Pope Pius XII? And so, part of practicing the true faith is submitting to the Pope. And if you think Leo XIV is the Pope, but then tune him out, you're not really practicing the Catholic faith. Of course, it's not like you have to be totally plugged into everything that is going on, but you must at least assent to his teachings. At least, even if you don't know them, you must at least be willing to submit to his teachings, and Francis's teachings and Paul VI's teachings and so forth. The problem will not go away just by saying that I'm going to focus on traditional practices. What you're doing is you're basically just deciding not to look at it. But the questions are still, out there, and they're still. You must, just like with Christ, you must make a decision for him and for his church, and against the false church. And so I can understand the frustration and the aggravation and exasperation, everything that this whole situation brings with it. But we're not going to accomplish anything by just saying I don't want to hear about it.
Hierarchy to call out the unfaithful hierarchy. It doesn't mean we can't talk about things that are problematic or anything like that. It's just, it is not my role to declare a pope invalid. And that's why I never had an opinion on whether Francis was a valid pope or, all of it. It's just, this is the situation we're dealt with. We all are men trying to get to heaven. So I'm just going to continue to try and get to heaven, live out my Catholic faith, be a good father, be a good husband, and try to bring people to the light of truth and try to bring people into the church. I don't see how I could bring people into the church and then explain to them, no, this isn't really the church. I don't see how God would make his church invisible like that, where it's just up to a bunch of guys with internet access who have heard conspiracy theories to come to that conclusion. Because if you go to anywhere that outside of America, like Sedevacantism is a very first world position. It's people with internet who go and read these theories on websites and things like that. It's not, it would take away one of the marks of the church, which is one, first off, right? One, holy, Catholic, and apostolic, but also the fact that the church has to be visible. So those are my main contentions with it. But like I said, I've never done like a deep dive into it or anything. So maybe I will have some conversations with Sedevacantists and see how those conversations go. But I'm like that. I don't see how it's helpful. It doesn't seem helpful to me. I think we're better off trying to evangelize within the church.
All right. I think that was the completion of his 12-minute video. So yeah, thank you, Anthony, for your thoughts on that. And so, like I just said, it all begs the question, is the Vatican II Church the Catholic Church or not? If so, stick with it, go with it, be a full-blown Novus Ordo, because then that is where salvation will be found. But the fact that you're having reservations about that, I think, kind of shows that you very much recognize that there is a problem there. And he says, I don't know, Kevin, that may have actually been cut off a little bit by because it was right at the very beginning of this last segment there. He says, I think that that's upon the faithful hierarchy to call out the unfaithful hierarchy. And you see the problem right there again, an unfaithful hierarchy. If they're in communion with the Roman pontiff, they're not unfaithful. In order to not be a Sedevacantist, you have to, while still recognizing all these, the faithlessness and these problems, you have to engage in all kinds of, you have to introduce all sorts of bizarre concepts that are really not compatible with Catholic theology, with the very faith that you mean to live out and that you want to teach your children. he says it's not my role to declare a pope invalid. Well, it depends on what you mean by declare. Of course, you can't make an authoritative declaration that would bind consciences of itself, right? But it is rather important to point out that somebody who, by Catholic teaching, cannot be the Pope is not the Pope. It's important because we must submit to the Pope, and Catholics do submit to the Pope, if there is a Pope. And even when there isn't a Pope, the Catholic always desires to submit and, has this disposition of submission to whoever the Roman pontiff is or will be when we have one. And so, he says that he never had an opinion of whether Francis was the valid Pope or not. And, I hear that a lot. But it just shows that he wasn't submitting to him. Okay, how could you just not consider that issue important? The only way you could consider it non-important is if you don't submit to him anyway. And so yes, we're all men trying to get to heaven. Oh wow, I'm getting flashes here. We're all just men trying to get to heaven, yes, precisely, and live out our Catholic faith and be a good father, good husband, and bring people to the light of truth, he says, right? And bring people into the church. Okay, but that's exactly what the difficulty is, right, that we're discussing. Well, what is the light of truth? Is it Vatican II? Is it the 10 examples I mentioned? Are these part of the light of truth? When you bring people... right? He says, I don't see how I could bring people into the church and then explain to them, no, this really isn't the church or isn't really the church. Well, yeah, of course. But you wouldn't bring them into the Vatican II church only to tell them that it's not the true church. All right. And then he says, I don't see how God would make his church invisible like that, where it's just up to a bunch of guys with internet access who have heard conspiracy theories to come to that conclusion. Well, okay, but that's a misrepresentation, though. For one thing, it has nothing to do with conspiracy theories. Not really. I mean, you will come to the conclusion that there is, that you would come to a fork in the road, so to speak, where you have to decide which way am I going to go here, simply by reading the old papal documents, right, from before Vatican II, or the theology books or the catechisms. And you might say, well, but okay, that's only because you have internet access or something. Well, what you're really saying is that it's only people who have the books, right, who have the information. Okay, fine. But what are you faulting us for? Are we not supposed to use the traditional, literature and so forth? I mean, that is how the Catholic faith was transmitted to the common man. And yes, of course, internet access makes everything so much easier and so much better and faster and so on. But internet access is not the problem here.
But what if let's go back to the Middle Ages and somehow the Pope, quote unquote, declares that God wills the diversity of all religions. I mean, is this something that anyone in all time through the entire history of Catholicism is just going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, that sounds about right? It's insane. It's absurd. I mean, and you list these 10 things. It's like, these aren't just like, oh yeah, that's kind of, yeah, it's a little bad. These are absolutely blasphemous heresies. I mean, that's what blows me away. It's kind of like, yeah, they're problems. That God wills a diversity of religions. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, at that point, it's all over, I like to point out that the way, you can't have it both ways, okay? You can't say on the one hand, well, God wants a diversity of religions and Protestants are Christians in communion with the mystical body or whatever, are part of the mystical body, members of the mystical body, but then, being a Sedevacantist is bad. Like, you can't be a Sedevacantist. And I know that's not Anthony's position.
And a Protestant.
Yeah, exactly. What's that?
Right.
Yeah, so I'm mentioning that because I want to point out, there's basically nothing you could, there's no danger in becoming a Sedevacantist, right? As long as you stick to the actual faith from before Vatican II. right? Because what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is that the Vatican II religion is true, and then you're good anyway, because you're baptized, you're professing the faith, and God wills a diversity of religions anyway, right? So, I mean, you really can't go wrong being a Sedevacantist. Although, of course, it is rather, it is, you know, depending on where you live and stuff, that can be a great hardship. However, you know, we have to see this within the context of divine providence. You know, God gives us crosses, but he also gives the grace to deal with those crosses. But I just want to acknowledge that, yes, being a Sedevacantist can come with a lot of hardship. And so I'm not trying to, you know, like sit in an ivory tower here and just, somehow look down on people who, you know, live out in the boonies where, you know, or just in parts of the world where there is nothing, you know, they have no real community with other Catholics and so forth. I realize it can be very difficult. And, you know, let's talk briefly here about, the invisible church or whatever. You know, there is, yes, the Catholic Church, first of all, the Catholic Church is visible, and we must profess that. And we must profess it in the way it is taught in the dogmatic theology manuals, in the Church's magisterium, and so forth. We're not trying to change anything there. But, you know, visibility, or I think more properly, I think what he's really talking about is apostolicity. A lot of people think that as long as you have that external structure then takes care of apostolicity and visibility and all that, but that's not the case. If the Novus Ordo Church is not preaching the apostolic doctrine, then it does not have apostolicity, right? There is a mystery here about how exactly all of this works, okay? But where there are going to be questions where we're just going to have to say, at least for the time being, I can't figure it out. I don't know the answer. Okay, we don't have all the answers neatly packaged and you know, easily explained and so forth. There are some things that are very, very puzzling, and where in my opinion, no completely satisfactory answers have been given yet. But mystery is compatible with Catholicism, with faith, and so forth. Contradiction is not. So we want to be careful to, yes, leave room for mystery, but don't affirm contradictory ideas and then say, well, I'm just trying to be Catholic. Well, we're all trying to be Catholics. But contradiction is not going to help with that. So, let's see, by the way, regarding conspiracy theories. Okay, now let me say something about conspiracy theories. You know, until, before Vatican II, I think starting from roughly the 1700s, the popes would preach against plots against the church that were being developed by, I think they were usually denounced as clandestine sects, or I'm trying to think of the actual term. What's that?
Secret societies?
Secret societies, thank you, yes. Which of course were usually Masonic in origin or in spirit. And back in those days, you know, they were secret societies because they had to operate in secret, because in order for them to be able to operate. And it was clear to the popes, like they were informed about what was going on with these plans, including the most famous, I guess, of them is the Alta Vendita. This is the essentially a Masonic blueprint for the subversion of the Catholic Church. And it is an authentic document. It's not just some theory, some conspiracy theory. I believe it was ordered. It was first shared with Pope Gregory the 16th, I believe, in order to be published either by Pius IX or Leo the 13th. And I don't mean to, get into this in any detail or anything, but I just want to point out that for centuries, it was the popes who warned of conspiracies against the Catholic Church, plots to subvert the church, to destroy the church, and especially to bring down the papacy. Okay, because that was always the greatest menace to the Freemasons is really the papacy. Okay, that is the object of that they want to see destroyed. Okay, and well, you look at after the death of Pope Pius XII, all of a sudden all these warnings ceased completely, and John the 23rd was I think it was he who reportedly said that the church has no enemies. Okay, I mean, what a dumb thing to say. Okay, what an incredibly stupid thing to say. Of course the church has enemies. Okay, the entire world, in the sense, is the church's enemy, because she is because the world is the enemy of Christ. Okay, just like Christ had enemies, so the church has enemies, and it would be very, very concerning if the church didn't have enemies, if you know what I mean. Let's see. So did we cover everything? So Anthony was saying, wait, we did talk about visibility and apostolicity a little bit. Okay, so apostolicity isn't just a matter of material succession. It is also a matter of doctrine. You must have apostolicity of doctrine as well. And clearly the Vatican II Church doesn't have it. So Anthony closes with, he doesn't see how Sedevacantism is helpful. So let me just summarize. Sedevacantism is helpful because it makes possible professing and adhering to the true Catholic faith without affirming contradictions. All right. So yes, we do have mystery. We have some unanswered questions and difficulties like that. So, well, let me summarize and say that Sedevacantism is helpful because it makes possible professing and adhering to the true Catholic faith without affirming contradictions. Right. Yes, we have difficulties. We have mystery. We have unanswered questions and so forth, but you no longer have the issue of a defected church, which you have to resist in order to be Catholic. And with that, I think we've given quite a detailed response to Anthony's 12-minute clip, but I thought it was, and I apologize for rambling a little bit. But I'm trying to do this just based on some notes and as well as off the top of my head without having to write a script first. So,
well, you do. I have to say too, you had those 10 steps, and I think you made a great point. You could have a full episode on each of the 10. I mean, so it makes sense that it goes long. I mean, you have some very deep, very important material here to cover. So, yeah. So I'm grateful for it because I think it does. It is helpful that I mean, even if someone goes out and says these types of things, I think it's good to bring the receipts, as they would say. I think you did that well here. Well, and just real quick, I just want to say too, if anyone, there's going to be some choppiness probably to this video. There's going to be a little bit of issues. It was a long go of it, thanks to the editors. So if Mario seems a little strange, a little choppy at times, that was why. We just had some internet issues.
We had
we'll do the best we can. We're going to do the best we can with the editing. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you think I remember what I wanted to say?
After this recording, I don't know.
Actually, anything. Yeah, no. I just let me thank Anthony again for for making that video, and I hope also that by taking our time in responding to it at length, I hope we're kind of dignifying it. Like it's meant like as a like we're taking his video seriously, and it deserves a thoughtful and detailed response. Not to be argumentative or anything, but just to hopefully bring some light to these things and explain why we're Sedevacantists and why these matters are so serious.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you'd like to talk to him. If he wants to come on the show, I think that'd be pretty cool. I'd be willing for him to come on if he has any questions that he'd like to ask you, and maybe have a member of the clergy come on, Louis Brecchio, so, get a group together and yeah, maybe help answer some of the questions he has. I think that could be fruitful, and I would enjoy it. So that is an invitation for me. I don't know if I'm not going to speak for Mario, but I would be up for it. So Anthony, you're welcome to come on the show if you would like, if you watch this.
Thank you, Kevin, as well.
No, thank you, Mario. Yeah, I get it. Thank you really seriously for putting this together. I think it's informative, and it was a good response that yeah, I hope someone is impacted positively, and as we said, see, the grace is earned by the patience of the editors will gain graces for someone somewhere.
Yes, indeed. And hopefully it's also then not too tedious for people to listen to. As you can see, I wouldn't have been able to fit all this in a tweet.
No, probably not. Well, we'll try to do too. We'll try to cut this up into pieces too, to get it kind of into the digestible bite sizes too, that I think will be helpful as well. But again, as always, Mario, thank you very much. Everyone go over to novusorderwatch.com.org. I always forget. I think both actually work.
Both of them work, yeah.
Both of them work. Yeah, go over there and make sure you support Mario and everything that he does. You can support us over on Patreon as well. Patreon, just search Catholic Family Podcast. And well, we look forward to perhaps having Mario on again. Maybe we'll talk with Anthony. Maybe we'll discuss one of the 10 topics that Mario brought up. There's so much to unpack here. Yeah. We appreciate all of you that stuck up with us for this entire podcast, and we hope to see you all soon. God bless you until next time.
God bless. Thank you all.